These are troubling times as debt ceiling negotiations hit a wall, unemployment rises. What's more, Italy on the verge of financial collapse, and China's economy is still at risk of overheating. Joining us with some ideas for where we go from here and how to protect your investments, the legendary Jim Rogers from London today. Jim, we're thrilled to have you with us. So I read on a blog that follows you that you are shorting long-term government bonds. You wouldn't take any yield to loan the government money. So are you, worst case scenario here with these debt reduction negotiations going on for the debt ceiling, do you think we'll default?
Well, we're going to default one way or the other, where they may not call it default. But, Laura, you know, you can inflate your currency and pay people back in worthless money. So it can happen. And these debt reduction talks are a sham as far as I'm concerned. We've been talking about this for 30, 40, 50 years. 25 years ago, there was the Grace Commission, which said we've got to stop it. And then they passed the Graham-Rudman Act that said we will not have a deficit spending anymore. Well, they just ignore everything and they continue their merry ways. And they will again.
So you do expect yields here. We're in a higher interest rate environment. I mean, you do have to expect some rallies. I want to get the market perspective, and then we can get more into the politics of it. You're going to have to cover those shorts at some point, because if you look at the rest of the world, the U.S. is less bad.
Well, maybe. I'm not sure that's true. Maybe everybody's bad. Yes, of course I'm going to have to cover my shorts sometime. I'm short the government bond, the long-term government bond. Something is probably going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months where I will have to cover for a while. So far it's a profitable trade. But if there's some news on the budget or something, who knows? And the bond market might rally. But it's a false rally. And then I hope that I'm smart enough to short government bonds again, because we have serious problems in the United States. We have inflation. We have huge debts. We've got problems.
So how do you see this deficit negotiation sorting out? Do you think we'll ultimately have to raise the debt ceiling, or should the two be mutually exclusive?
Well, they'll probably raise the debt ceiling and they'll announce some kind of wonderful deal, which they will then promptly ignore, just as they did the Graham-Rudman law. No, the United States is not going to close down. It might be good for the world if the United States government closed down for a while, but I cannot see that happening. Something will happen, things will look better, but then in 6 months or a year will be worse again.
You have started this Government at Home program. It has a huge following on Facebook and other social media websites. The idea is to get lawmakers to spend more time right among their constituents, keep lobbyists off. If that were happening more, do you think we'd have a better resolution to the country's budget crisis?
Of course we would. I mean, if congressmen had to go to the same grocery store you do and send their kids to the same schools and ride on the same highways or the same public transportation, the world would be a lot different. What they do, they go down to Washington. We send 535 congressmen and senators to Washington. The lobbyists descend on them, and laws get passed that we have nothing to do with. But if everybody stayed home and voted from the high school gym or from the local town's city hall, we'd have a much different government, and the world would probably be better.
From a global investment perspective, what's the best geography? I know you're very involved in China. We had some disappointing economic data out of China. The imports declined, and that's very concerning considering all the focus on seeing China transfer into a more organically driven economy versus exports. We know Italy is back in the news today. Its fiscal house now in crisis, with Greece in the last couple of weeks. So where do you go with your investments?
Well, that's a good question. I happen to be long commodities, and I'm short emerging markets and short technology in the U.S. I'm also long currencies. I'm short a major American bank, and I'm short bonds, as you said. It looks as though we're going to have a period of turmoil for a while. I hope that my shorts protect me. Hope I even make some money on my shorts. Another market that I'm looking at is Japan. I own the Japanese yen. I bought Japanese shares when the tsunami came. Mm-hmm. I think I'm probably going to buy some more Japanese shares if I were looking for a new market, and if things continue to go down, that's probably where I would buy.
No love for the U.S. dollar. What do you think about the greenback?
Well, no, I own the U.S. dollar as we speak. The U.S. dollar has been terribly beaten down. Everybody's bearish on the U.S. dollar, including me. I'm one of the biggest bears, but I own it. I own the U.S. dollar. I've been increasing my positions in the U.S. dollar because there's so many bears. It's fundamentally a terribly flawed currency. But when everybody's bearish on something, it's usually a time to own it, at least for a while.
Timothy Geithner, you were extraordinarily critical of the Treasury Secretary through the financial crisis and the bailouts. We know unemployment ticking up, we learned last week. What do you think of the Treasury Secretary? Also reports right after we get past this deficit reduction negotiations and the debt ceiling that he might step down.
Well, he never should have taken the job. As on your network, I explained 2 or 3 years ago that Mr. Obama was going to find out that Mr. Geithner doesn't know very much, and we're all finding out. Mr. Geithner doesn't have a clue about what's going on. Just about everything he's done has been wrong, and it hasn't helped the situation at all. We're in worse shape now than we were a couple of years ago, except now we have staggering debts to show for all of the efforts, which didn't do much good.
Jim Rogers, great to have you. We so appreciate your take on things. Thanks again for your time today.
It's my pleasure. It's always my pleasure. Thank you.
And Jim Rogers is also the author of A Gift to My Children, A Father's Lessons for Life and Investment.